Many years ago, I became a vicar in a parish in London, and hard as it is to believe right now, I was then a bright young thing, newly in ministry, and had lots of fresh ideas and new thoughts about ways of doing things. And so when I came into the parish, I was a little bit like a bull in a china shop, really, introducing all these new ideas. And there was a chap in the congregation called Reg. Now, Reg was in his 70s, and I'm not going to lie to you, Reg really couldn't stand me. He had real problem with me. Every time I went up to talk to him, you could almost see him bristling, and he did everything he could to avoid me. But I had a bit of a soft spot for Reg, and really wanted to get to know him better and to share the gospel with him. Now, the one thing I did know about him was that he liked golf, and he liked to play golf. So after a service on one Sunday, I went up to him and I said, Reg, next time you go playing golf, can I come and caddy for you? I'd done a bit of caddying as a teenager and I'd really enjoyed it. Well, anyway, Reg looked at me, and being of that generation, he was far too polite to say no. So he just sort of said, yeah, that'll be absolutely fine. So the following week, I met him up at the golf course, and he played golf with his friends, and I caddied for him, carried his bags and what have you. The conversation was very, very stilted. But we had, well, I enjoyed it anyway. And at the end of the round of golf, I said to him, can I come and caddy for you again next week? And he said, okay, yeah, fair enough. He was too polite to say no. And anyway, this went on for a few weeks, and I really wanted to share the gospel with him. But over a period of, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, I caddied for him every week, and he began to soften up a bit, and we began to have conversations. And then Reg began to share quite deeply. And he told me, first of all, of his time when he was conscripted into the RAF for the Second World War at the age of 18. And within a few weeks, he was flying bomber missions over Europe. And he was telling me about the friends he had who died, and the trauma that he'd suffered doing that, and how he was absolutely petrified of it. So he began to become quite open about that. And then he shared about his marriage, his wife who'd died not so many years previously. He talked about his job, and eventually, after a few weeks, we began talking about matters of faith, and we developed quite a close friendship until his death. I still used to wind him up endlessly, I have no doubt about it, but we drew quite a lot closer. And so that time on the golf course with Reg was really, really useful. And it taught me 5 really key lessons about evangelism. And if we want to share the gospel with other people, like I did with Reg, these 5 key lessons that I hope you might find useful. The first was that if we want to evangelize, if we want to share the gospel with people, firstly, we need to get into the world. I would only meet with Reg on a Sunday after the service, and it was very much, I suppose, my turf, because I was the vicar and, you know, I was the leader of that church. But I realised I had to get out into his world if I was going to have any opportunity to share the gospel with him. And I think that's true for all of us. The temptation for us as Christians is to live in a bit of a holy huddle. How many non-Christian friends do you have? How many non-Christian friends do you hang out with? Or are you, like I was back then, and probably still am to a large degree, sort of caught up in a holy huddle of like-minded Christians? If we want to evangelize, we've got to get out into the world and meet with people where they're at, where they live and work. We see that in the very nature of Jesus Christ. In John chapter 1, we read the words, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us." And so if we want to be successful in evangelism, we need to dwell amongst those in the world, in their space, rather than just staying absorbed in a sort of holy huddle with like-minded Christians. The second thing that I learnt was that in order to be effective in evangelism on the golf course, was I had to be genuinely interested in Reg's story. Too often, I think, we come at evangelism from the perspective that we have something to give and people have something to receive. We come from a position, I suppose, of sort of moral superiority or spiritual superiority, and sometimes we're not genuinely interested, as we should be, in the lives of the people we're speaking to. I remember many years ago I used to be part of a prison visiting team, and there was about 20 of us used to go down once a month to a prison. And at the end, we'd all get back together again at the end of the day. And I always remember the meeting always used to start with the leader of the team saying, "How many souls have been saved today?" And even then, that used to make me bristle a bit, really, because these were prisoners, individuals, each with their own story. They were people. They were beautiful children of God. They were, creatures of God, not just embodied souls to be saved. We need to be interested in people as people if we want to be successful in evangelism, not just see them as sort of spiritual scalps to take in the name of Jesus. And Jesus, of course, modelled that to us, didn't he? In so many different ways, but most especially, I think, we see it in the example of the woman at the well in John chapter 4, where Jesus kind of engaged in conversation with her and talked to her about her life and listened to her and interacted with her about her world. He had a genuine interest in who she was as a human being, and out of that he was then in a position to be able to share the good news with her of who he was. So be interested in people's lives when we come to share the gospel with them. Thirdly, I would say we need to be patient when it comes to evangelism. It took me weeks and weeks and weeks to sort of earn the right, as it were, to share the gospel with Reg on the golf course. I wasn't able to do it on week 1 or week 2 or, for the next few weeks after that. But eventually, through patience, I was then in a position to be able to share the gospel with him. People are on a spiritual journey, and when we come into their lives with the gospel, we are sort of meeting them at a certain point on their journey. And, they may be right at the beginning of their spiritual journey, or they may be in the middle of it, or they may be in a place where they are sort of ready to receive the gospel. But we need to be patient and not assume that we can just walk into people's lives and lead them to Christ there and then. And we see that, of course, in the example of the lives of the disciples, particularly in Mark's Gospel. There's a sense in which they were called by Jesus to follow him and didn't really understand who Jesus was or the implications of a relationship with him for their lives. And then they sort of journey with him. And then in Mark chapter 8, Jesus says to them, "Who do you say that I am?" And there's that moment where Peter then says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And so they've moved on to the next phase of the journey, but still didn't really get it. And then they journey on to the next marking point, which of course is the movement towards the crucifixion of Jesus. But that's a good example in Mark's Gospel of people being on a journey and Jesus picking the right moment to ask the right question of them. Be patient when we come to share the gospel. My final 2 points, I think, are possibly the most important of them all, really, because they're actually about self-learning. When we come to share the gospel with other people, when we come to evangelize, it's not just that we've got something to teach them, it's that actually they've got something to teach us. And we need to be willing to learn from other people as we share the gospel with them. So my fourth point related to that is that we need to be humble when we share the gospel with others. We have to come from a position of humility. And one of the interesting things I learnt with Reg on the golf course was that actually God had been at work in his life for many, many, many years, long before I was born, and he was already on a journey. I had no right to just turn up in his world and assume he knew nothing about Jesus or anything about a relationship with God, and assume that it was my role to somehow educate him into that. I had to humbly accept and humbly learn from the fact that actually God had been at work in his life for many, many years. When we evangelize, people aren't converted because of you. God is already at work in their lives, and you may come along at the right point to reap the harvest for God, as it were, but the seeds may have been sown many, many years before. And Paul talks about that, really, or gives us an example of that in Acts chapter 17, when he goes to Athens, and he's preaching to the people there in Athens, and he starts off by saying, you know, I commend you that you are very religious, but let me tell you the name of the God whom you worship. So he kind of acknowledged right at the beginning of that speech that you know, they were religious. God was at work within them. You know, they did have an understanding of God, and he was there to take them on to the next stage of the journey. But he kind of started out with that humility, I think, which is really important. So, and you know, we've got a lot to learn, I think, as well as to give. And that's my fifth point, really, is that when it comes to evangelism, we need to remember that we've got as much to learn as we do to teach. You know, Reg taught me so much. It was really interesting where, you know, before I started caddying for him, one of my sort of impressions of him was that he was tremendously risk adverse. That, you know, everything I suggested we do, he's like, oh no, don't do that, or no, we shouldn't do that, or, you know, and he was opposed to any change. And I thought, I've never met a more risk averse man. But when he started talking to me about how he was flying bombers over Europe at the age of 18, I thought, my goodness me, if anybody can tell me about risk and show me about courage in the face of danger and courage in the face of change and the unknown, it's Reg. So he was the bravest man that I'd ever met, not risk averse at all. And I had to humbly accept that and realise that I had more to learn from him than I did to teach him. And he taught me so much about marriage and life and work ethic and balance in life and all sorts of things. And yes, I did share the gospel with him, and he did grow in his faith, which was wonderful. But I think if anybody was blessed in that relationship, it was me being blessed by Reg rather than him being blessed by me. Yeah, just because somebody's faith looks different from yours, it doesn't mean that they don't have faith. It just looks different. And we see that, I think, in Paul's letter to the Romans. The Roman church was a very interesting one because it was made up of Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. And there was a lot of tensions in the church about how to do things. And the Jewish people, the Jewish Christians wanted to hold on to their Jewish traditions, and the Gentiles wanted to hang on to their Gentile traditions. And so to a large extent, Paul's letter was about encouraging them to learn from one another, to learn from one another's traditions, and then to come to a point where they could develop mutual respect for one another and grow in faith together. So, yeah, I think there's 5 points about evangelism. You need to get into the world. You need to be genuinely interested in the people you're talking to Christ about. You need to be patient. You need to be humble, and you need to learn as much as or more than you teach. Through evangelism, God really can use us, as I found out on the golf course. But through evangelism, God really can teach us, as I found out on the golf course. So I say, God bless Reg, and God bless that golf course. I have to say that, it was an awkward relationship at times, and I think I wound him up just as much afterwards, until the day he died, really. I still think he used to roll his eyes when I'd introduce new things. But we managed to reach a point of mutual respect for one another, and I think undoubtedly God blessed my prayers and my efforts, and I was able to lead him into a deeper relationship with Jesus before he died. So there we are. That's just 5 things I learnt on the golf course with Reg, and I hope that they've been useful for you. I hope that God blesses your evangelistic endeavours as well. And as always, thank you so much for being with me today. I know that you're really busy, and I really appreciate all the time that you give to be with me. So there we are. Thanks for being with me. Hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye.